Hello, happy Thanksgiving and greetings from the Northwest Territories. I just wanted to take a few minutes out of my day to talk to you a little bit about how I would go about getting things done as MLA, how I went about getting things done as the mayor of Telkwa, and my approach that I will take. And I'll tell you a little bit about the story of the Telkwa water tower as well. So I think being successful as a representative involves four different steps. The first step is courage. So, really, if you don't have conviction in what you're doing and you're not passionate about the cause that you're pursuing, politics really isn't the right thing for you. And for me, I've always gotten involved in this and generally from an underdog position in elections, but I always knew that what I was trying to do was the right thing, and I had very specific objectives. So with that as my motivating factor, I've actually been fairly successful. So once you know what you want to do and once you have that passionate objective, I think that the next really critical aspect is to have a strategy. So it's one thing to know what you want to do. It's an entirely different thing to actually have a plan of how you're going to go about achieving that. And, for me in politics, you have to understand the different dynamics and the types of people that you're dealing with. And you do have to strategize and be fairly particular in your approach. And so the third thing is once you have that strategy and you know how you're going to go about trying to achieve your objective in politics, which usually involves negotiating with people, I think this may be the most important step, and I certainly think it's the one that I'm the best at, and that is research. So once you know what you're doing, you have to really build a case, and it's a bit like being a lawyer where, especially if you're an underdog, and people have pointed out that I basically, if I'm elected, will be, essentially an independent in the legislature. That doesn't intimidate me because I know that if you build your case and you have the information that you need and you have the statistics and you have the comparisons and you've done your freedom of information requests and you've read the reports, that you can sit there and you can actually provide a compelling argument that makes it so that the side that may not want to give you what you're asking for, sometimes they end up in a position where they really have no choice because it's so obvious that it's the right thing to do. And then finally, the fourth element is truth. So it's important if you're getting into this, and again, you dive in, you develop a strategy, and you do all the research, that you're also able to self-reflect on what you're discovering and determine, have I learned something through this process that indicates that maybe I wasn't right, or maybe the people that are working on this have different insights that can land with a better result or a more fair objective. And I'm very good at doing that as well. I'm more than willing to listen to people, and I think it's really important to hear different objectives on issues. And so, often you can end up with a better result that way. And so that's really, again, another important component. Now, just a quick anecdote story of the Telkwa water tower. I was never really interested in becoming a politician, but when I was living in Telkwa, there came a time around 2010 where I really felt frustrated by the approach that our political leadership and the bureaucracy in Telkwa was taking in terms of their prioritization of spending taxpayer money. And Telkwa is not a very wealthy community in terms of its municipal budget already, so I was quite frustrated with that. And so on the courage end, I knew that we really need to focus on our main infrastructure and water in particular. And so way back in 2010, long before I ran for mayor, 4 years before I ran for mayor, I actually went door to door in the village, not once, but actually twice. Once before an alternative approval process, once before a referendum. And I'll admit it was nerve-wracking, and I didn't know what kind of reception I would get, but I did know that people seemed to feel the same way that I did about the project that the council is prioritizing versus what we wanted. So once I knew that I was going to do this, I had the courage to go out and just cold call people and knock on doors. I had to develop a strategy. Part of that was an elevator pitch, and part of it was also how we would move forward with this objective. And so after getting elected in 2014, people had, leading up to the election, because the council hadn't moved, said, you need to run. You need to actually move forward on this. At that point, we began, and thankfully, very supportive council, people that really understood, like I did, where the priorities of Telkwa should land. We developed a strategy for being able to get the funding that we needed from the provincial government. And of course, they knew that it was really important. So in 2017, they actually, because we had been pushing so much, did offer us a grant. And the grant that they offered us is $1.6 million. Unfortunately, I did the math and knew that it wasn't enough. It wasn't what our residents would be able to afford. And so we actually did the unprecedented step again, which took incredible courage, not just of me, but our entire council, of turning that money down. And so next, we really needed a strategy now, because, we were potentially on the hook for turning down the money to build a project that we've been trying to build for decades. But I knew, because I had already done a lot of the research in terms of comparisons of funding for other communities and the need for the water tower, that we could build our case. And so we had a strategy of going back to the provincial government and presenting how it simply wasn't fair to not fund Telkwa on that infrastructure. So that led to the third step, the research. And really, it was a full-time job for me for quite a long time, going through statistics and data from the BC government and comparisons with other communities, and ultimately landed on a similar community in northeastern BC, Taylor, which is, again, about the same distance from Smithers, from Fort St. John, as Telkwa is from Smithers. And I use that as the foundational part of our argument, because Taylor was a town that had an ice rink and beautiful walking trails and, so many different amenities that Telkwa didn't have, and beautiful streets. And at the same time, they were the community that were being offered the grants. And so we took those comparisons, and I took them to our senior levels of government, to our MLA and MP, and began lobbying, showing this data and just going, this is just simply not fair. Anybody in their right mind can see that it's not fair. And so as we worked through it, landing on the truth part, it became totally evident, not just to us, but to everyone that we were dealing with, that the truth was that Telkwa was being treated unfairly, and that we deserved the funding that we were asking for. And I can tell you, there were some heated conversations with the bureaucrats and some of the elected officials in Victoria, and some interesting visits to try and change our mind coming up to Smithers, and it was a very strange and intense process. But we stuck to our guns, and we stuck to the truth. And in the end, it was a very happy story. Telkwa, instead of getting $1.6 million in funding, ended up less than a year later, ending up with almost $3.8 million in funding. And to give you an idea of what that means in Telkwa, there's only about 500 houses. So the difference is roughly $4,000 a house by us sticking to our guns. And even more than that, Telkwa has kept the ball rolling, being able to get additional grant funding after my term for our sewer system, I was very engaged in Northwest Resource Benefits Alliance, and that indirectly resulted in another $3.6 million for Telkwa out of $100 million funding for the Northwest. So because we knew that we were right, we went through that 4-step process, and in the end, the result was even better than we possibly could have expected. And Telkwa really is in a better financial position than it ever has been for development, for its infrastructure security, and really for moving forward. So I think as MLA, residents should know that that's the exact approach that I'll take when we have issues to deal with. It's the approach that I've been working on and taking with ICBC, and we are making progress. I'll continue to push for Resource Benefits Alliance and resource revenue sharing for our region, and definitely deal with the infrastructure inequity between rural areas and the city. So I have objectives. I already know what I'm going to do. I'm not running just to be MLA. I'm running because I know that there are some really key issues in northwestern BC that need to be dealt with. And I know that our other candidates for the NDP and the Liberals won't be focused on that. They'll be focused on representing their parties. So I'm really hoping that I'll get your vote on October 24th. My name is Darcy Reppin. I'm running for the Rural BC Party. And if you want someone that's focused on representing you and Northwestern BC and the Stikine riding, I am the candidate that will be doing the best job for you. Thanks very much, and enjoy the rest of your Thanksgiving, and hope to see you all soon.